There is one question. Has there been any work to integrate APL with reader macros in order to avoid using raw strings for code? For example, to avoid this double backslash that you mentioned during the talk.
Yes, I haven't built any reader macros myself. It's easy enough to do a basic APL macro that will just take a string of code. The main issue around reader macros is that APL has a wide variety of options that it can take. If you look at the README, you can give it state information, you can choose a workspace, you can pass variables in different ways. So all those would need to be accounted for. It would take some doing, but I know it would be possible. For instance, you could have a character that starts an APL block, but before that you have a list form containing APL's configuration. So that's my thinking on there for the moment. And also I make heavy use of the APL-C, which allows you to pass variables in from a list very expediently. So that's another reason that I haven't done a whole lot with reader macros, is that I like having that APL.C right in the middle of the code.
Okay, a little bit of volume up for you, please.
Okay.
We don't currently have any questions from the audience.
Okay, I have a second one ready from, yeah.
Okay.
And can you say anything?
Hey, can you hear me?
Yeah.
Hi, can you hear me? Hello?
Yes. Yes.
Okay.
It seems that the video on stream is stuck on Fee rather than our speaker. Miguel, could you fix that, please? Seemed okay.
Probably because Andrew was a little bit quiet, so Zoom didn't pick him up. But yeah, one more question. To what extent can user APL code be optimized? And does APL perform any optimizations of its own?
So APL has a framework for different kinds of optimization. I think somebody also asked if there was a way of recognizing common patterns in code, and there is. You can find this in the APL/patterns.list file in the top level directory. This is the code recognition system. So there are many idioms in APL that can be performed more efficiently than if they were implemented in a naive way. For instance, one of these is the disclose, rotate, ravel. So if you remember from yesterday, ravel unravels an array into a vector, and then rotate will flip it in reverse. And then disclose just gets the first element of that. So in other words, what that does is it gets the last row major element of any rank array. So obviously that can be done much more quickly than if you actually created the raveled array and flipped it. It's incredibly wasteful to get that one value. So I recognize when a user does that, and I'll just go get the last row major element. That's one form of optimization. Another type that's done as part of the scalar function macro is that it will recognize if scalar functions are done in series, and then it will combine them into one function. So that means if you did like 3 minus 5 plus and then a big array, the naive way of doing it would obviously be to add 3, make an array of that, add 5, make an array of that. And if you compose those together, you get just one function, which is like 3 minus 5 plus x, and then you compose that over the array. That's another form of optimization. And then for the future, I'm looking into things ranging from enabling SIMD. This would probably use the defined BOP in SBCL, so it would only apply to SBCL. And also looked into the possibility of, through CFFI, using the ArrayFire library. That's what CodeDefunds uses. CodeDefunds is a APL compiler that integrates with other systems like the Dialog APL system, and it can use GPUs to accelerate certain APL calculations.
Okay, thank you. A question from the live audience.
Mm-hmm. And you say that there is this plan to allow the APL code to use GPUs for offload and still defined as APL computations, and we can use APL to call APL functionality from Common Lisp. Does APL currently provide Common Lisp functions as some system call like things to APL code?
So are you asking, can you include common Lisp code inside of April code?
Well, not include, but call in some way or register common Lisp code for calling from APL.
Yes. April has a parameter called store fun, which lets you pass in functions from the outside common Lisp. For instance, April by default doesn't produce it doesn't provide any kind of system interactivity functions. The other APLs will often have things like open binary file and things of that nature, or execute a shell command. But you can add all of those into April using the store fun. So this makes kind of real sensitive stuff in April by default, but you can add that. So you can, yeah, and then like in theory, you could, for instance, reduce a vector containing lists using a function that takes two lists and produces another. So that's an even closer melding of Lisp and APL than has been possible before.
Okay, thank you. I think we are running a little bit short of time, so two more questions. One from the internet asked a moment ago. Can you please repeat the name of the optimizing APL compiler other than dialog?
Code Defunds, CO-DFNS, written by Aaron Su.
Okay, thank you. And one practical question from yesterday, practical because, well, how does April deal with non-rectangular structures? Like if someone made a sphere out of block cells?
Yes, so if you made a sphere out of block cells, one way to do it could be basically a vector of vectors of different lengths. So those being the kind of rings around the block cell. So you could, like, arrays are rectangular structures, that's their nature. But you can sort them and use nested arrays to manifest other kinds of structures. And then one more thing I'll answer because I saw this asked is how April collects and tracks variables, or how its scope is handled. So in APL, there's a concept of workspaces, which refers to basically the entire state of the interpreter. April has workspaces. They're a bit different. They manifest as common Lisp packages. So you create a workspace. It has symbols and variables within it. Under the hood, it's a common Lisp package. And you can there's also syntax to include variables and functions from one workspace in another. That's not something you see in other APLs because their workspaces are handled a bit differently. But because Aprils are common Lisp packages under the hood, you can straightforwardly include things from one in another.
Okay, thank you. I guess this is the last question since it seems we have a lot of lightning bugs today and we are a little bit short on time. Thank you.
Thank you very much.